Hi everyone, my name is Hannah, and today I'm going to be talking about the historical figure Harriet General Tubman. Did you know that with no formal knowledge, Tubman was able to create the Underground Railroad system where she brought over 300 enslaved African Americans to freedom? I'm sure many of you didn't. Because of this, I'm going to be discussing her accomplishments, how she did it, and why she's such an important person during Black History Month as well as Women's History Month. It all begins in 1820 when Harriet Tubman was born into slavery. At just the age of 6, she began working as a house servant. About 7 years later, in her teen years, she began working in the fields at the plantation she was at. One thing to note about Tubman's personality is she would do anything to protect and stand up for what she believed in, even if it ended up harming her in the end. While still working on the plantation, in 1844, Tubman married a freed black man by the name of John Tubman. About 5 years after this, in 1849, she decided it was time to escape her plantation in fear of being sold. With the help of a white woman, Tubman was able to escape on foot from her current location in slave country to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She did this by following the North Star, settled in Philadelphia, and stayed there for a few years to work and save up money to help other enslaved African Americans. First, she decided she was going to make the trip to Maryland in order to save her sister as well as her sister's 2 children. She went back and forth between Maryland and Pennsylvania a few times before deciding she wanted to make the treacherous yet very, very dangerous journey down south to help other enslaved African Americans. The first time she went down, she went to help her enslaved brother as well as 2 other men. Her third trip down to slave country, down south, she went down to find her husband and bring him to freedom with her. However, she found out that her husband had committed infidelity, cheated on her, and taken up another wife. So instead of bringing him back to freedom with her, she found other slaves seeking freedom and brought them with her instead. After much practice and critique of Tubman continuously traveling to the South to bring others to freedom, she was able to perfect her way of travel and plan. So Tubman decided that she would do this more often and go down south and bring up other enslaved victims with her. She would use overseers' horse and buggies for a partial way of the journey, then commit the rest on foot. And then she would plan to rescue the enslaved seeking freedom on Saturdays because missing slaves did not make the news until Monday mornings in the newspaper. So she had about 2 to 3 days of leeway before anyone really knew the slave was missing, and by then she was already gone out of slave country. On the journey to and from the South, Tubman always carried a gun on her. Some of you may think this could be protecting herself from others along the way, but instead it was to threaten the fugitives she had with her. She carried a gun on every journey she took to slave country in case any fugitives tried to give up along the way. She would threaten to shoot them and say, "You'll be free or you die," because it wasn't safe to turn around and it wasn't safe to stop where they were. Tubman made the journey down south 19 times until 1860. She was able to bring over 300 fugitives to freedom and is now known to be the greatest conductor of the Underground Railroad system. Some of the most well-known people she brought back up with her were her parents as well as Frederick Douglass. After this, in 1869, Tubman had settled in Auburn, New York, married a Civil War veteran, and adopted a daughter a couple years later. She worked as a Union spy, gathering information from other enslaved African Americans beyond Confederate lines to report back to the Union Army. Tubman is known for her extreme heroism and bravery by risking her life and freedom every single trip she took down to slave country, even if it meant only others would survive and she was harming herself in the end. Harriet Tubman is an extremely influential woman and major role model for everyone during Black History Month, as well as Women's History Month. Thank you for listening.